Well, hello to the Lakes campus and the Ediville campus of Four Rivers Church. We are so excited about all that God is doing in your campus and what God is doing specifically with the new facility that Calvert City will be moving into very soon, and with the launch and the immediate growth of the Ediville campus. God's doing some really great things. Would those of you in Paducah today just join with me as we celebrate all that God's doing throughout our region in Four Rivers Church? Let's celebrate together. Yeah. So we're talking about the story that I grew up calling the widow's mite, or mites. Now, I don't know where the word mites come from. Apparently, it's just another word for coin. But this story intrigues me because it has some very interesting characters. In this story, you have a few specific characters, and I just want to talk to you about those today. So the first character that comes up in the story are the teachers of religious law. And this particular group of teachers, Jesus doesn't care much for them, does he? In fact, Jesus kind of pokes at them with what he says. He says that they are ultimately corrupt, irresponsible thieves who use their place in society and in the church to take from other people what is not theirs. And ultimately, they steal from other people, but then they know how to dress, and they know how to talk, and they know how to pray publicly, so that the masses as a whole think that these are pretty cool people. And Jesus, he doesn't hold any punches here. He says their punishment will be more severe. So what we learn from this character is, first of all, sometimes people you think are great aren't. Sometimes people you think are big are really small. Sometimes people who on the outside look formidable and exciting and godly, sometimes you have to look deeper than what's just on the outside in order to realize that sometimes people masquerade as good so that they can be bad, right? Now, I'm not going to ask if you've ever known anybody like this, because I know we all have. And we're in church and we might be thinking things like we're not supposed to judge and stuff, so we wouldn't want to raise our hand. But the truth is, we could all raise our hand if we were asked the question, have you known anyone who used their place of power to push other people down? Who used their place of influence to benefit themselves, but not to benefit those they were supposed to be leading, or they were supposed to be caring for, or they were supposed to be guiding? And in Jesus' mind, in this story, that is the person that is at the lowest end of society. And he sees them as receiving the highest amount of punishment from God for their ungodly behavior. Right? That's the first character in the story. The second character in this particular story are the wealthy big givers. The wealthy big givers. You know, like most pastors, I like the wealthy big givers. Nothing wrong with being a wealthy big giver, right? But here's what the wealthy big givers in this story were doing. They were coming to temple just like they were supposed to. They were giving most likely a tithe just like they were supposed to. That's a 10% of their income. But Jesus uncovers something in this story with these characters. He uncovers not what they gave, but he uncovers why they gave. And he uncovers how they gave, and he uncovers how they feel about giving. In the story, Jesus helps us see that this particular group of people, they're giving large chunks of money. Like in our culture, these would be the people who get their own plaque. You know what I mean? Like our church doesn't do this, but I know most of you may have spent a little time in a church that's into the plaques, right? With the little name on the back of the chair that tells you who paid for the chair, you know? Or the name, you know, I've been waiting one day to find a plaque on a toilet, you know, or a plaque. That's funny. And, you know, nobody wants their plaque on the toilet. You know, plaque, but I've seen plaques everywhere. I've seen plaques on the back of the doors. I've seen plaques on the back of the pulpit. I've seen plaques, you know, we put plaques everywhere because sometimes that's what we've done with those who make large donations. We've said thank you in interesting ways. Now, don't get me wrong. Jesus does not make the wealthy big givers. He does not make them the bad guy in this story. They are simply a character who are used as a reference point to highlight the third character who is actually listed as a very good hero in this story. The person who has so many positive things to say. In this story, you have, like I said, the religious teachers of the law. They're the bad guy, okay? Then you have the wealthy big givers. They're the ones who are giving large amounts of money, but it costs them very little because it's not a sacrificial gift. Jesus even goes so far as to say that they're giving a tiny portion of their surplus, okay? That's like the kind of stuff that flows off the top of the cup when it's full. In the end, their cup, it's still full. See what I'm saying? So Jesus is not saying you shouldn't have given. He's just saying it wasn't really a sacrifice. And then there's the third character in the story. The third character is the gal that we've grown to know as the widow. Now, she's known as a widow in this story because unlike our culture, in their culture, when a woman's husband died or when a woman's husband left her, that particular woman had absolutely no way to fund life. There were not incoming jobs that provided paychecks for single ladies in that day and time. And so it was a very difficult thing for a woman in that day and time to be a widow, especially if she had children. That's why there were so many guidelines and rules about if your brother dies and he had a wife, then you were supposed to take her on as your responsibility. Or if the church or the synagogue at the time found that there were widows among them, then they were supposed to pay their bills and provide for their needs. The widow in their culture was without a doubt the most vulnerable person in their society. And the word poor doesn't really fit. It's not really a very good translation. This woman was not poor. This woman was destitute. This woman was completely and totally dependent on someone else for every meal she ate, for the house that she lived in. She was completely and totally dependent on someone else for every stitch of clothing that she owned, for everything. The word that's used is better translated beggar, okay? Or as I said on Facebook today, and bag lady, someone who you could just tell needed help in a great way, and without help was going to have a lot of trouble in life. In this story, this character, she does something that all of us would have advised her not to do. We would have all told her not to do what she did. She takes 2 coins, the only 2 things of value that she owned at all. The only 2 things she had, and she takes those 2 things and she drops them in the correct collection plate. Now, before I go any further, I just got to explain this character, because this character, she intrigues me. Only a few verses before, the teachers of religious law were being scolded for misusing the money of widows, right? Jesus has just said that these hooligans and difficult leaders were getting rich off by shamelessly stealing from people who had nothing. But then, right in front of his eyes, a woman who had nothing came and gave everything. You see, Brad Henson logic would have run up to her and grabbed the 2 coins out of the plate and given them back to her and said, "Ma'am, keep your money." There are a couple of reasons why Brad Henson would have done that. First, I would have been thinking, what are those 2 coins going to mean anyway? I mean, it's not enough to buy anything with. We can't do anything. The synagogue's not going to have a new youth center because of this gift. It's not going to do anything. It's not. But this is such a difficult thing for her, such a simple thing for us. Why would we want to take that gift, right? Let me tell you what her 2 coins were worth. In their culture, the dollar, if you will, the standard of money was called a denarii or a denarius, okay? And a denarius was worth 1 man's wages for 1 day's worth of work. 1 day's work, that was what they would make. There was another coin that was under it, and it was 1/25 of a denarii. 1/25. Then under that, they cut that coin in half, and then under that, they cut that one in half. And what that means is this woman, what she gave was literally worth 1/100th of 1 day's wages. 1/100th of 1 day's wages, which is why it's translated in some translations as a few pennies. She has a very small amount of money, and she gives everything that she has. That is the third character in the story. The fourth character in the story are read over by most people. The fourth characters are the disciples. The disciples who aren't even noticing what's happening. They're off doing their thing. And Jesus says, "Come here, guys. You've got to see this. Come here. I want to show you what this woman just did." And he points them He points them toward her, and he says, this lady, this character number 3, this very impoverished, helpless woman, she just gave more than everyone else gave. Because what everyone else gave was a small portion of their surplus. But what she gave was everything she had. The final character in this story is Jesus himself. And he's the one who's willing to teach us about what it truly means to be spiritual and what it truly means to be godly. He's the one, I love this about Jesus, who's willing to see the things nobody else sees, who's willing to notice the details that you and I wouldn't notice, and that's willing to apply an outcome that I never would have noticed or been able to apply. You see, Jesus sees these other 4 characters, and in the disciples, he sees men who need to learn, men who can change the world if they will learn, men who, if they'll pay attention to the reality that he's about to teach them, can be used by him to lead millions and millions and millions of people to Christ. If we were to place ourselves in the story right now, I think we're the disciples. We're the ones who need to notice where Jesus is pointing and fix our eyes on what Jesus is looking at and listen to what Jesus is saying. This poor woman has given more than everyone else combined because she gave all she had, as opposed to the large gifts that were only a portion of someone's surplus. You see, there's only one thing I want you to leave with today. Calvert City, Eddyville, there's only one thing I'm asking you to leave with, and that is this. It's not about how much you have to give. It's not about how much you have to give. It's about how much of you Jesus has to use. Can you guys say that with me just at all campuses? Let's say this out loud. It's not about how much money you have to give. It's about how much of you that God can use. Let's replace the you with me, okay, or I. Let's do this. It's not about how much money I have to give. It's about how much money of me, it's about how much of me that God can use. That's revolutionary. Because like everyone else, I think we fall into the pit of thinking, my gift doesn't do anything. You can't do anything with 2 pennies. Let's make it not just about money, because Jesus is not just talking about money. My life, I don't have all these talents. I don't have all these things. I don't have this education, or I don't have this great job, or I don't have this influence. I don't have this. What can I give? I mean, and what ends up happening is that so many people put themselves in the place of saying, I'm the person who just goes to the church. That's what I do. I'm going to be the one who just goes. They bought a chair for me. I'm going to sit in it. That's what I'm going to do because that's me. And I'm telling you that if you see the world that way, you will miss what Jesus can do with you. You'll miss what Jesus can do with you. Jesus took, in this story, a woman who had nothing, who was extremely vulnerable, who was weak, who was dependent on the rest of the world for everything. And in her gift that was definitely meager, meek, simple, small, little, compared to everyone else's, he says, not true at all. Her gift was impactful, beautiful, large, powerful, godly. Because it's not about how much money you have to give. It's about how much of you God has to use. See, it doesn't matter if you have a lot or if you don't have anything. We can all tell God what He can and can't use. We can all say, this is mine. It's my piece of the pie. I want it. I'm going to use it for me. No. Or we can say, you know what, Jesus, you can have everything. You can do whatever you want. I'm going to follow your guidance. In this story, some things that you should take home with you today, and this is going to be the quickest, shortest little Brad sermon you've ever heard, okay? I hope you take this home with you. First, notice this. Jesus watched the giving closely. He did. Jesus was focused in on who gave what. He did notice. You simply can't say, God doesn't care what I give. He does. He really does. The honest truth is He does. And it's not just about, again, it's not just about finance. God cares whether or not much of you is useful to Him. He cares how much you are making yourself available to Him. He saved us in order to use us and guide us, and He cares. First, the second thing is Jesus wasn't impressed with how many zeros are on the end of the check. Jesus wasn't at all. Not even a little bit impressed with the guys who gave big amounts of money. Not at all. He didn't even warn, thank you. And He wasn't bragging on them. Nothing. That's not what He was impressed with. Jesus was impressed with how much trust and how much generosity and how much love was in one woman's heart. That impressed Jesus. If you want to impress Jesus with your giving, then be someone who gives from a heart that's full of love, full of generosity, full of joy, full of trust. That's the way to bless Jesus with your giving. There are 3 actions I can think of that are required of us if we're going to listen to this story and let Jesus point to us the way He pointed the disciples and pointed out this woman and said, use her as your example. The first action that's required is we need to think of the eternal significance of the resources that we have. We need to think of the eternal significance of the resources that we have in all too often our lives. Isn't this true? That whether it's money or some other thing, it comes in, it goes out. It comes in, it goes out. And I'm just going to ask, how many of you see that's kind of how money works in your life? It comes in, it goes out, right? All over the room we're like that, okay? Lakes Campus, Eddyville, absolutely. It comes in, it goes out. Most of the time, we don't think of it as having much more significance than what it comes in and goes out for. You know, it comes in and goes out for a house payment, comes in and goes out for a car, comes in and goes out for health insurance, comes in and goes out for clothing, comes in and goes out for food. God would guide us to look at the eternal significance of what we're doing with the resources that we have. The Scripture says in Matthew 6:19 through 21, let me read this to you. Don't store up treasures here on earth where they can be eaten by moths and get rusty, and where thieves can break in and steal. Store yourselves treasures in heaven where they will never become moth-eaten or rusty, and where they will be safe from thieves. Wherever your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Think of the eternal significance of the resources that you have. The second thing is to resolve that everything you have is at Christ's disposal. Everything you have is at Christ's disposal. Now listen, some of us are going to go, but then He'll make me give it all away. I need that. No, He won't. It's a cool thing about understanding the way Jesus cares for us. This is a situation where a woman gave everything away and Jesus was proud of her. But that is not normally the way Jesus reacts and deals with giving. In fact, something like tithing is a 10%. That means 90% stays with us and 10% goes out to be used for God's will and God's work. For the most part, God gives us finances to care for the needs of our own lives. That's why He provides the pie, so to speak. Okay? The slices that we use and give away are all about what God wants us to do with that eternal significance. I'm not saying that God's going to call anybody to give everything away. What I am saying is that if you want to be a Christ follower who gives God everything you have in here, you have to resolve that no matter what He asks of you, it's all His. It's all His. Matthew 6:24 says, "No one can serve 2 masters, for you will hate one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." So either, here's what He's saying, either God is your Lord and money is a tool, or money is your Lord and God is a tool. See the difference? In the story I told you earlier, or your campus pastor shared with you, in that story, the religious leaders of that day were using God as the tool to get as much money as they could. They learned how to dress right and pray right and say all these things so that they would get more money. Money was their God. God was their tool. Okay? He's saying to us here, we should make sure that every resource we have is devoted fully. We are resolved that it's God's. He does with as He wishes through the guidance that He gives us in life. So we think of the eternal significance of the resources we have. We resolve that everything we have is Christ's and can be used at His disposal. And the last thing is we give what He wants where He wants. We give what He wants where He wants. Malachi 3:10 says, bring all the tithes, or the tenth, that's what he means, into the storehouse, that's the local body of worship, so there will be enough food in my temple. If you do, says the Lord Almighty, I will open the windows of heaven to you. I will pour out a blessing so great that you won't have enough room to take it in. Let me prove it to you. Try it. Let me prove it. Let me show you. So here's my guidance. I'm finished. Wherever you are today, is to ask yourself, God, do I notice the eternal significance of the resources I have? Help me to notice it. Have I resolved to put everything at your disposal? If not, help me realize where money is a God to me and you have become a tool to me. And as we do that, then say to God, what do you want me to do? And how do you want me to do it? And then do what He says. It might be that you're in a place in life where you're thinking, I really want to do this, but man, to take the step from where I am to where I think I need to be, that's a gigantic, big leap. I would encourage you to maybe consider finding ways to live out generosity and love from your heart, just like this woman did, that are a stair step in the right direction. Does that make sense? A stair step in the right direction. We can take a step toward doing God's will with our money. We can take a step toward being a blessing with the resources that we have. We can start small. We can do baby steps. But one way or another, we need to move in the direction of doing God's will with the resources that we have because we've put them at God's disposal. He is our Lord. Money is our tool. We don't love money. We love God. We don't use God. We use money to love God. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that's helpful. As we said earlier, it's not about how much money you have to give. It's about how much of you God has to use. Would you pray with me?